And now this is Luke chapter 6, and we're going to go from verse 6 through to 11. On another Sabbath, he entered the synagogue and was teaching, and there was a man there whose right hand was withered. The scribes and Pharisees were watching him closely to see if he healed on the Sabbath, so that they might find reason to accuse him. But he knew what they were thinking. And he said to the man with the withered hand, "Get up and come forward." And he got up and came forward. And Jesus said to them, "I ask you, is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save a life or to destroy it?" And after looking around at them all, he said to him, "Stretch out your hand." And he did so, and his hand was restored. But they themselves were filled with rage and discussed together what they might do to Jesus. This is an amazing story, and you can imagine the drama within the synagogue. Here they are. Jesus went into the synagogue, and there's a man there with a withered hand. We don't know how it was withered, perhaps paralyzed, perhaps useless in some way. Certainly couldn't stretch it out or use it as you and I would use our or an able person would use both their arms. And Jesus knows that the Pharisees are there. Jesus is teaching, and the scribes and the Pharisees are there to see if Jesus will heal on the Sabbath day. For some reason, I'm sure they would have never had a law which said you shall not heal on the Sabbath day. But because there'd never been somebody who heals supernaturally in that way. You'd have to go right back to probably the last one would have been Elijah or Elisha. But here they're watching, and perhaps everybody knew that the Pharisees were there to watch Jesus. So the whole assembly is charged with some tension, really, about what Jesus will do. But he's at the front and he is teaching. And so, and they're watching to see if he's going to heal. And Jesus says to this man, come up and come forward. So the man comes forward with Jesus and all of these Pharisees and scribes and all of the congregation of the synagogue. And Jesus said, "Is it better to do good or to do evil on the Sabbath day, to save a life or to destroy it?" And it would have been for the Pharisees and the scribes, I suppose particularly for the scribes, to answer. They should know the scriptures. And perhaps they really couldn't answer his question. And it says that Jesus looked around at them all, and he says to the man, he says, "Come on, answer my question." And he turns to the man, he says, "Stretch out your hand." And he did so, and his hand was restored. You can imagine the people going, a sharp intake of breath amongst the whole congregation as this man's hand is healed instantaneously before them as he stretched out his hand. Amazing, an amazing miracle. But the Pharisees and the scribes, rather than rejoicing in the healing, it says, but they themselves were filled with rage and discussed together what they might do with Jesus. Because I think that, if you like, they couldn't say anything to Jesus because there's no law against stretching out your hand, on the Sabbath day. They'd made rules about not walking a certain distance, not lighting fires, not doing anything. But I think those were the main things were stop working and don't light fires. There's nothing about stretching out your hand. I mean, All of the Pharisees and Sadducees, they probably stretched out their hands as they were praying on the Sabbath day. There's no law against it. And Jesus just said to this man, stretch out your hand. And I'm sure they were just outraged or angry because they couldn't fault him. They couldn't come against him because he was displaying what God was like, the kingdom of God. And they were outraged, and they were filled with rage, and they discussed together what they might do with Jesus.